Hey, Teen Summers Tribe, Jim and Jamie back with another episode. We are here with a friend, investor, and educator in my eyes, Tom Tousignant. Tom, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tom, will you say your last name for us? Because we have a Spanish friend who helped us with the book, and he said your name
Yeah.
like so beautifully. I'm just wondering, I'd love to hear it from you.
Well, the beautiful way to say it is the French way, which is Tousignant.
Yes.
But we're in America, nobody can do that. So we say like two Z and your uncle's wife, your aunt. So Tousignant.
Oh,
So
Tousignant.
See, I've known
yeah,
I knew he was
Tom,
messing it up.
well, and he only took me a decade to tell me that I'm messing up his name on the.
hey, people have done far worse.
Tousignant.
Well, Tom,
Beautiful.
there's obviously a lot of crossover, and that's why I wanted to bring you on today. We appreciate, you being involved with our family education side of 18 Summers, but we've also done a lot of real estate together. And
Yeah,
and what always attracted me to to you and our kind of developed clientele and then friendship was our core values. And I'll never forget the first conversation that I had of how we started working together. But before we get into that, will you just tell people a little bit about your background, where you came from and how you ended up into real estate investing?
yeah. So I really came from a real estate family. You've probably heard that before, but my grandfather started a real estate company in this little town of Gardner, Massachusetts in 1928. And my dad was the youngest child of 17. Said that
17.
correctly?
Wow.
Yeah. So
Goals.
no multiple births, same husband and wife, same mom and dad. So they, but anyways, there's lots of good jokes around that from the French Canadians, just like the original dad jokes. But six of my uncles went off to World War II, and my dad and five of my uncles got into real estate, got into the family business, all on the real estate sales side. And I went to college as an engineer, worked as an engineer for about 6 months, hated it, kind of ran away, and you're running away and joining the service. I ran away and joined the Air Force, and was active duty for 10 years. Got to fly F-16s, which was my goal and dream when I went into the Air Force, and so that was pretty cool. And then I was got out, was a commercial airline pilot for a couple of years. Got furloughed after 9/11 with a downturn, and gave me an opportunity to sort of reinvent myself. And it was kind of cool because I said, they're going to call me back someday, but I'd rather make that decision to go back to the airlines from a position of strength. And so I took the time to, I think it was just really fortunate. My mindset at the time, I hadn't done much personal development at that point, but I recognized like this is an opportunity, not a curse. And so a lot of guys in that same boat as me just said, well, I just got to go sell shoes or work at the mall for 6 years or 5 years till they call me back. And I said, well, I'm going to start something new. And I looked at the family history of real estate, and I liked real estate, but I hated the idea of selling real estate. So I had much more of a financial background and mindset. So I got into the mortgage lending side. And my initial goal was to really focus on working with investors so that I could also become a real estate investor, and saw that as a long-term direction I wanted to go into. So I never got into the focus on real estate investment lending, but I did pretty good in the mortgage industry, and that allowed me to take some of my excess savings and start investing in real estate. And then, so I was in the mortgage industry for about 20 years, and I was privileged to lead just an awesome team of people in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and got to a point where I was sort of looking at the end of my career and when I wanted to ease out of that traditional career field and or that 9-to-5 job, if you will, which was never 9 to 5. It was always 7 to 7. And so yeah, started working with my team on making sure they'd be ready to take over, make sure it was better and stronger and faster when I left than it was when I was there. And thought it would take me 5 years. It turns out they were better and stronger and faster than I gave them credit for. So after a couple of years, they were ready for it. And we went through some other stuff with my wife and with the global economy and what was going on. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to spend that much more time in the office. And my side hustle of investing in real estate allowed us to make that choice. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
Yeah. Well,
I love that you said, like, everybody else was waiting around for the next thing to happen. You know, they were waiting for, oh, well, they'll come back to me. Oh, well, I won't be in this position forever, so I'm just going to do something. I love that it's such a lesson and such a personality trait to say, like, I'm not going to wait for them to come back to me. I'm going to find what my next thing is. And I think that that's so important. It's such a skill that I feel like we learn from others. Like, that's something I hope we teach our children, you know, like, go get it, hustle for whatever that thing is. If you're in the wait, you hustle while you wait. If you're in it, you hustle while you're in it, whether you're learning, whether you're, you know, it's not just about waiting for someone else or the next thing to come. So
Yeah.
And that is a very pivotal move, because I have someone close to me that Jamie knows. In the 80s, he was an airline pilot, and he made incredible money from then. And literally going from the 80s to the 90s.
are we talking about airplane?
No, I was a commercial airline
Okay, yeah.
pilot, and a family member. And he went, Tom, from a very healthy 6-figure down to half of that,
At least,
to
yeah.
just a 5-figure, you know, as his seniority went up and his hours went up, and never had the foresight to invest in real estate like you, or try something new. Which, so you really did 2 steps. You stepped away from what was known, and also kind of your hobby, because we've talked about your flying, which we'll get back to, but also going into mortgage, and then investing. And you were already doing some investing when you and I really started to hit it off 8 years ago. But you came from the Carolinas down to Florida. Why did you do that? I always like to ask people what brought you here.
Yeah. So, you know, I think if you go around the world globally and survey people and say, if you move to another country, where would you go? And they still say America, right? I think if you go around the United States and say, if you were to move from where you are, where would you go? Nobody says Cleveland, Ohio. Sorry if you're from
No.
Cleveland. I got friends there. Went to a baseball game there last year. It was awesome. It was a great town, but it's not where I dream of growing up and moving to, you know. And just, I could pick, there's lots of towns I could pick. I could say, you know, Schenectady or Erie, or, you know, there's lots of places in the Rust Belt and stuff like that. But Florida's a place where people want to go. So population growth is huge. I think the other thing people think of Florida is the risk of hurricanes, which I think is overblown. I know it's a big deal.
Pun
if you're
intended.
on the,
No pun intended.
oh, geez, didn't even recognize that one. Yeah. But, you know, it was funny. I had a funny story on hurricanes. The last one that came through, like the Punta Gorda and Englewood area, I don't really remember it, but I don't remember the name of it. They came right across the Southwest up to Jacksonville, went out to sea, came
Ian.
back in at Hilton Head.
Oh, is
That was Ian. Yep.
Yeah. And it literally traced a line across my real estate portfolio. So Southwest Florida, Northeast Florida, out to the ocean, back into Hilton Head, and then up towards Charlotte. But I'm watching the Weather Channel, and I swear the Weather Channel reporter is standing in front of one of my rental properties.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a bad look when the Weather Channel shows up in front of your rental property. And we had like 2 shingles and that blew away, and an electrical wire disconnected. It was less than $1,000, and, you know, 24 hours, everything was back to normal on 5 houses that were down there. So,
wow.
Well,
but,
and that was always interesting, Tom, because, you know, getting to the new construction, because, you know, we talked about this, you were more of an early adopter of new construction, because, you know, I did bulk foreclosures, old fixer uppers, and we were really starting to hit stride when you and I first started talking, you know, how I think it was like 8 years ago, and saying, well, we're doing
I
this.
can't believe it's been that
And
long.
there
It's
there
amazing.
wasn't even a term build to rent. I mean, now you open up the Wall Street Journal, you open up this build to rent. But how did you have the faith to go from new construction to the old fixer-upper way, which is how everybody always did it, you know, including me? But you
yeah.
were like, no, I don't want, you know, I always remember how definite you were with going new construction, which wasn't always the case with people I
Yeah.
started working almost a
So
decade
true.
ago.
Right. So my portfolio today is I've got 23 doors, and 12 are new construction, and 11 were rehab, you know, fix and flips that I bought from turnkey providers, and those are in a different market. And the only property I've sold, 2 properties so far. I bought one way back in 2007, but I did buy a rehab house in Florida, and I sold it 2 years later. But all my other rehabs I bought, I still own them. So I started with the traditional, you buy the house that somebody, bought at a foreclosure, they rehabbed it for rentals, and they found a tenant and put the tenant in there. And I did not expect much appreciation, expected continued repairs on their properties because they're older houses, and both of those things were true. They did appreciate better than I expected because the whole country did. But I started looking at it as a diversification play, saying, okay, a new geographic area in Florida, a very strong geographic area. But then I didn't expect a whole lot of appreciation or a whole lot of monthly cash flow, because you spend a little more on a build to rent house. But I expected it would be very easy to rent and to stay rented. And I figured I'd have less maintenance and operating costs as time went on, which really played out. And that's one of the things I've learned in the years of real estate investing. The worst thing I can have is turnover. When someone leaves, they quit paying rent, and you get to spend money on cleanup and repairs. So it's a double whammy when people move out. So providing a good house that people want to stay in for a long time, that they feel is their home, is really important. And then on those times when they do have to move out, something that's repairable very quickly. So it gets back on the market, and it's very appealing, so it rents very quickly is really important. So that was something about new construction, build to rent, that I didn't anticipate, that was really nice.
Yeah. I was talking this morning with another client that's been with me for quite a while, and we were talking about that trajectory. And I've done both, just like you. I kind of morphed from the traditional fix up an old house and rent it to the new construction. And what I found is, and I know you and I talked about that first 3 years is a very, very important part of getting off on the right foot. And what I learned the hard way, and Tom's in our book, and I know
actually sounded like you were spot on.
Yeah.
quoting I was like, wow, it's like he's read this book that we wrote.
Well, he's
together.
in it.
Yeah.
He is in it. Tom is in this book, Passive Income
But as
Playbook.
you read, Tom, like I started to learn where I was more concerned about quantity when I wouldn't look at things like turnover. Where's the area, and what I've seen too many times is investors get in and they buy a couple of properties in tougher areas, deferred maintenance, and by year three, they're waving the white flag. We're done. All this turnover, all this maintenance repairs, but they were promised that initial higher cash flow.
Well, and two, it's like big things go out, like the air conditioning goes out. It needs a new. Oh yeah, like we're dealing with all that right now. But with the new
construction, you have to sacrifice some cash flow up front. But by year three, you're not really ready to give the white flag. You're like, ooh, things are just starting to get good.
And if they're not, you cash in your warranties. You're like, oh, AC went bad. Here we go. That 210 or whatever. I don't even know what it is.
So but how?
I've heard you say that. I think that's what it is.
That's my part of the game. So, but has that been your experience as well? Because I remember you saying, Jim, I don't want a second job.
Yeah. That's a big part of it for me. And you brought up a couple of good points there. One of the things I tell people all the time is you want to get, a lot of people, everybody, it's universal, wants to invest in real estate, right? Everybody's at some point read an article, heard a podcast, watched a TV show, somebody talking about investing in real estate. And people struggle to get started. There's once you get started, it gets a lot easier. But what I tell people is once you get started, like get 4 rental properties as quickly as you can. And just 4 rent checks. And what happens at 4 rent checks, there's 2 things magical that happen. And one of them is if you only collect 3 checks, you typically can still make 4 mortgage payments. So that's something bad happens. I'm not throwing continual money into an investment once I've made it. And then the second thing that happens, if things go good, that extra cash flow starts adding up. The appreciation starts adding up. And in a short period of time, you find you can buy a 5th house quicker than you could have if you didn't, right? And then it starts multiplying. I went from 2 houses to 4 houses to 23 houses. I bought 12 houses in 1 year. I think it was actually 14 houses in 2018, with almost no money out of pocket, because I did a couple of cash out refinances. The rents had grown. I was able to support a higher mortgage payment with the rent growth, took the cash out, reinvested it in new properties. And all people are like, you have 23 houses? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, how'd you do that? I'm like, I'm not really sure, because it's not You know, if you look at how much the houses are worth and you say, okay, well, you put 25% down, I put in a fraction of what you think I would have to put down to get 23 houses.
But that's part of the playbook that, you know, we try to talk in there. People say, well, how did you come up with all this? When you responsibly leverage off of what you've already planted, you can grow it forward. And you have the discipline to say, I'm going to pull this money off of this property to put it into the next one or two. Some people will pull it off and they'll say, hey, let's go to Vegas or buy this fancy this or that. And then the growth stops. But I watched you pull it out, dump it forward, and then stay disciplined. And, you know, now what excites me about this for you is what you expressed and we talk about in the book was I got to see you keep your hobbies and give priority to that which was priority. And so, you know, do you want to talk? I mean, first of all, Air Force guy, the second meeting we had, you flew down to see me, which I thought was awesome. We met in Palm Coast. Yeah. And then, you know, you and I share a pretty deep bond where I did the kidney donation with my father. And, you know, that was one of the first conversations. I don't know how that came up. It's not something I normally talk to about with real estate investor clients, but your wife was going through similar. And I know you said that had a big, you know, you went from the airline to running a great mortgage company, but then saying, I got to evolve to the next level now because I want to be here for Kathy. I mean, would you mind sharing a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, where to start on that? So my wife had a hereditary kidney disease. And so in 2020, she got a kidney transplant. But so back up from that, 2009, I've been in the mortgage industry about 5 years. I'm having some success. The market's doing pretty good. And I went to work on a Saturday like I often did. And it was a beautiful day. I came out of the office in August in the Carolinas. It's normally 95 degrees and humid, but for whatever reason, it was like 82 degrees and dry. And I stopped to get some gas, and a guy pulls it next to me in this beautiful Harley Davidson. And I'm like, all right, I'm going right now to the dealership to buy a Harley Davidson. And so I go home, I'm getting changed. And Kathy says, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to buy a motorcycle. She's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yes, I am. And she says, no, you're not. Yes, I am. And like 30 minutes later, that's all we had. She said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. She finally, being the smart one, she finally goes, listen, you can go fly airplanes if you want to, but you're not riding motorcycles. And I had stopped flying in the Air Force 5 years earlier, and I hadn't even thought about flying in 5 years. So I went to the local airport, got checked out, started renting a little Cessna 172, and now I laugh about it because I'm like, you know, babe, you know, 15 years later, I bought and sold, I think 12 airplanes, and I bought a house on a runway and built a hangar, and you know, I'm like, you know how much we could have if we had that 15-year-old Harley Davidson with 25 miles on it sitting in the garage, because I never rode it after the first day. So funny. But the cool part of the story was 2019, I had signed a contract to buy a brand new airplane called a Cirrus aircraft. And Cirrus is the best-selling single-engine personal aviation airplane in the last 20 years in the United States. It's a really cool story, but they're famous for every airplane they've ever built has a whole airframe parachute system built in. So if you get into trouble, you yank down this handle, a parachute blows out the back, the whole airplane comes down the ground, you open the door and step out alive. And it's credited with saving over 250 lives. Yeah. So my previous airplane, I would beg Kathy to go fly somewhere, and she'd be like, okay. And then with the Cirrus aircraft, she's like, hey, where do you want to go fly today? Because she's got that level of safety and confidence. So anyways, I had an older model. I had sold it. I wrote a contract to get a brand new one. And then I got huge buyer's remorse. Just like, man, my wife's on dialysis. Like everything, like, what am I doing going and spending all this money on an airplane with all this going on? And I went to a good friend of mine and I went to Garrett Gunderson's workshop in Utah. And we were out there talking after that, and just like, get the airplane, man, you know? So my friend convinced me to get it. So I called the sales rep back up. I turned on I said, hey, what do we got to do? Let's get this thing going. So they get the airplane contract going again. They're going to deliver it in June of 2020. So pandemic hits, factory shuts down, they push it back. So August these dates are really important in a story. So August 6th, I go and pick up the brand new airplane, and I'm blown away. I can't believe that, a laid off airline pilot is flying this brand new, beautiful airplane with all these capabilities and safety and everything. Mm-hmm. And 3 weeks later, I went out night flying with an instructor, and it's the first time I flew at night in 20 years since I've been an airline pilot. And you can't fly at night unless within the last 90 days you've had 3 takeoff and landings at night. So I wasn't qualified for 90 days up until this day. That's August 25th. August 26th, we get a call, and this is 2020, so the depths, the dregs of the pandemic. We get a call from the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and they say, we might have a kidney that matches you, talking to Kathy.
Wow.
And while she's on the phone talking to him, I'm opening up my iPad with the flight planning software, and I'm typing in Rochester, Minnesota, and their first question was, where are you? They go, we're in North Carolina. He goes, well, how can you get here? Because if you know, there's a very time limit,
tight window
constraint on a donor kidney, right? And I'm going, we will be airborne in 30 minutes. We'll be 4.5 hours in flight. We'll be at the hospital in 5 hours. And the guy's like, wait, what? And Kathy's like, shut up. I go, no, we could be there in 5 hours. So anyways, the next day, they're like, well, we still got to run some tests, make sure, but it looks good, but we'll get a good night's sleep. We'll call you in the morning. We're like, yeah, right. We're going to sleep. So anyways, the next day they called us. We raged to the airport, take off, and
wow.
I've got a picture of the radar, but on the screen when I zoomed out, Charlotte direct to Rochester, Minnesota, there was a hurricane to the left of us, massive thunderstorms and traffic, horrible weather to the right of us. We couldn't have flown through either one of us, and there was literally a clear path with no clouds from Charlotte to Rochester, Minnesota.
Wow.
And we called the Rochester airport on the way to our airport and said, hey, I need a rental car. And they're like, well, we don't have any. And I was like, well, when I land, I'm taking my wife to Mayo for a kidney transplant. If there's not a rental car waiting for me, I'm taking a car. I don't care if it's the truck with the stove on top of it. I'm taking something. I'm getting my wife there. And so she's like, I understand. And so we landed. The guys rip up and they pull up in a car and grab our bags before the propeller even stops spinning. We're out the gate, and the hospital. We get to the hospital. They're like, "You here already?" So at that point, I was like, "Well, the money I paid for the airplane, I would have paid for a kidney. So I think the airplane's free, and the kidney is what I paid for." But anyways,
yeah,
right.
Well, amazing, and it just shows you like, wow, there's so many lessons there.
Well, the hobby actually helped take care of the priority, which was Kathy.
Yeah.
And I remember, and please say, no, that's wrong, but I remember the last deal you were doing with me and buying, and you said, yeah, I'm buying this last one because the cash flow on this property is going to pay for my airplane payment. Remember we talked about that? Is that accurate?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's pretty accurate. Yeah. So had I not been laid off from the airlines and had not gotten into the mortgage industry, had not started investing in real estate, I would not, and had not gone to that conference that convinced me to buy this airplane. It was way outside my comfort zone financially. There's like
so many things.
There's miracles where someone goes to sleep without an arm and they wake up and their arm grew back, right? I don't know anybody that's happened to, but that's a miracle. I think when you take 1,000 circumstances and decisions over a 25-year period of time and it comes together that your wife gets a kidney transplant, that's a miracle. Like that, you see the fingerprints of God at work all through those. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. We had that with Dad. So
well, I mean, all the time. It's like, and sometimes we struggle in the moment of like, oh, well, why didn't it happen sooner? Or why didn't it happen this way? Or why is this happening? But like what I try to teach our children, and even my sweetheart, is that things happen for us, right? Not to us. And so we can't always make sense of like, okay, but why was I laid off? That was so terrible. And all your friends or coworkers that were laid off at the time, are probably still sitting around going, man, I guess it's not going to happen, like, oh, why did this happen? And so often we get stuck in that moment of decision and we kind of have inactivity versus forward movement. And it just kind of stinks, or it sucks us back into like, oh, but why couldn't it have been different? Yeah. This is why, because it works out perfectly.
Well, and you're giving dates right now. So July 1st, let me track with Gloria's birthday. It had to have been July 1st of 2022. And I'll have to check because I have the screenshot. you and I were going back on Facebook, back and forth on Facebook Messenger.
Did you say Gloria's birthday is not in July though.
No, but we were doing Gloria's adoption ceremony.
Oh,
So
yes. Okay.
we put it on
Right.
Thank
Facebook.
you.
We're doing the adoption ceremony. We have 40 family
It
and
was
friends.
June. Yeah.
You reached out to me, but Tom reached out to me right after. I have the thing July 1st, and you said, "Hey, we're going back and forth. Congrats on the adoption." I'm like, "How's Kathy?" And we have this whole dialogue, and then you're like, "Oh, by the way, I retired from Fairway Mortgage. Thanks for the help."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Ah, yes."
You definitely cried.
Yeah, I definitely got a little
definitely
teary-eyed.
cried.
I'm like, what am I supposed to tell a guy that though? You know?
Tom definitely cried writing to you about our daughter. No, I'm just kidding. You know,
Yes.
I just am making all
Anyway,
these up.
but I remember that, and that
Yeah.
felt so good to me because I was like, okay, you're flying, you're with Kathy, you and I have that kindred spirit of the kidney donation, the family, and then you did that, and so
Yeah.
you had the courage actually to then step away from the mortgage company. Like, what was that like? Because that was again, you are talking about another evolution level when you said, I
Yeah.
love the mortgage thing, but I'm done."
Well, and I think what I heard you say too,
Yeah.
Tom, was that you stepped out faster than you thought because they were even better than you thought without, like, you kind of took your hands back and they impressed you with that.
Yeah. Yeah. It just has to you surround yourself with great people. You go, secrets of success is surrounding yourself with great people. And I think the other gift I've had is be able to identify and find great counselors or advisors. And Jim, you being one of them. I've got a great life insurance guy. I've got a great investment manager. Had some great business coaches and mentors. So being able to find, when you meet somebody and go, I can learn from this guy. I can follow this guy's advice. And I've been very fortunate to do that many times. And you're on that short list.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, we're not supposed to have favorites, but when, we have nearly 1,000 clients now. And when they said, avatar people, who would you like to work with over and over? And so we had to come up with a short list. And obviously it's not just about the real estate. It's about the shared core values. You know what I mean? A love of the country, a respect for, what our country has done, like you were saying, of an earning, a family history, putting family first, and and then looking at things differently. Willing to look outside the box. And I think you and I shared those values for sure.
Yeah, but I think what I wanted to, and I wanted to add on that was like great people, working with me. So many times people go, "Wow, the team you put together is just amazing," and I was just very fortunate to work with some great people, and give them an opportunity. And I joke with some of them now. They're like, "Yeah, I retired when rates were at 4. I retired at 4.25." And so in the mortgage industry, you don't talk about 2022. You talk about rates were at 7%. Because just a horrible time for all my friends in the mortgage industry afterwards and in real estate. With the rates just skyrocketing.
Yes.
But one of the things I do like to share is that it's a question for so many people. It's an age-old question: is how much is enough, right? And we even talk about that in the book. It talks about if you're just trying to build your net worth and you have this bucket of money, when is that bucket full enough? And I think for me and for Kathy, it was really a gift. It's just such a blessing to be able to go to be content, and you're like, well, sure, dude, you got an airplane. Like, of course you're content. It's like, no, it's more than that, just to realize like, this is enough. Like, I know I could have worked for 5 or 10 more years physically, mentally. I could have, and I could have continued to strive. And, it's like, well, I could say, well, I don't own a jet. There's guys that have jets, I want a jet. Like, I'm content. And to be able to recognize when enough is enough, and to say, okay, I'm only going to do the things that I really want to do now. And in doing so, create opportunities for other people to do, because of the team that I left behind at the mortgage company, they all had the chance to step up, and they had bigger decisions to make and harder decisions to make and tougher conversations and greater opportunities, so me getting out of the way also, I think, I like to think it gave better opportunities to others as well, instead of me just holding on.
That's great advice.
It's such a great example.
Is a gift.
We had a similar conversation this morning. We were launching the new book that you are in. Thank you for being in it with us. And that was one thing that Jim and I always talk about, exactly what you just said. It's not so much of how much, but how. It's a quality of income. It's a quality of lifestyle. It's not a quantity of income and lifestyle. Are we still able to play with the kids in the yard when they get home from school? Are we still able to have a cup of coffee in the morning before starting the day? Are we still able to travel and do work from anywhere in the world? And, you know, all of these layers of things that matter so much to us. And I, you know, hear that again, you know, that shared core value of it's not about how much, it's really and truly about how are you living.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love that.
Well, Tom, to put a bow on this, and again, thank you for coming on. Great conversation, very inspiring. I did not even know that story of the closeness of the donation and the flight. Like, I didn't
That's
even
so
know that.
neat.
And we've talked about this, you know, at least a dozen times. So that is
Yeah.
unbelievable. Any advice to people who are just starting out? Because it can be like drinking out of a fire hydrant or feeling like you're standing on the edge of an abyss, you know, to go into real estate investing. What advice, you know, being able to look backwards now, would you give to someone to get them off on the right foot?
Yeah. So let me expand that a little bit first, because I'm at a position where I'm able to look back over that 20-year mortgage career, which I was successful at. And I've also, I love what you guys do with 18 summers. And I think I've said to you before, Jim, it's like, yeah, but what about when your kids are grown up, you know? And, right. Cause I've got 4 kids, but they're all in their late 20s now, soon to be late 20s. My youngest gal will be 25 in July, but he's the one I went backpacking with in the Grand Tetons last summer.
Oh,
And,
beautiful.
so still having relationships with my grown kids and still being able to be physically active with them and stuff like that you know, is pretty exciting. But there's a you know, marginal benefit of your work. And there was a lot of times back in my career where I worked 60 or 65 hours a week, and I probably would have accomplished 95% of what I did if I worked 55 hours. Right. So make sure that you're taking that time. You know, I talk to my kids and I'm like, man, if I got a regret, it's that I missed those minutes that pass away, you know, even if it's just like, oh, I'm going to work for a half hour after dinner before the kids go to bed. You know, that half hour in my 20-year career of mortgages did nothing for me. You know, that email could have waited till tomorrow morning. Right. So if I look at any regrets on a successful career, it's like, and 95% is probably good enough. That you shouldn't be grinding grind for short terms, but not all the time, you know.
Great advice.
Grind for short.
Yeah, so I'd say that, and then you really want to. The goal of the 18 summers is to launch successful adults, but I want to launch successful adults that are friends with me too, right? I don't want to launch 5 strangers out in the world, right? That they're super successful and they don't talk to us, right? That's not
a success in my book then.
No, exactly. So, you know, what's the keep the end in mind. And then getting started in real estate is just, you know, it takes courage. It's a leap, and you just got to trust that long term it just gets it's very few investments. You know, you could say, well, I'm gonna buy, you know, 1960s, I'm gonna buy General Motors. Look how many cars they're selling. Well, General Motors doesn't get better and better every year, right? In fact, you would probably be in a net loss if you had done that in 1960s, just held till now, or AT&T or something like that.
Yep.
Real estate's as close as you can get to a guaranteed every year it gets better, you know?
Yeah.
So, and it's not every year 3%, right? Just like the stock market's not every year 10%, it's never 10%, but the rents over time will go up, property values over time will go up, 30-year mortgage payments stay the same, you know? And every year, if you look at any investment that's okay today in real estate, in 5 years, it's unbelievably good.
Yeah.
And so I'm telling people a lot of time, like, yeah, you're right. Buying, you know, meeting you in 2017 and buying those first 3 houses I bought in 2017 was amazing. Like, that was the best time to buy those 3 houses. The second best time is, you know, when today.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be great in 5 years. You know?
Exactly.
And
yeah.
it's going to diversify your portfolio into a point where at retirement age, whether it's 58 or 55 or 65, you're going to have an additional stream of income, an additional source of additional assets, additional source of capital that if the market's down, real estate's up, and vice versa. So it's going to protect you and make you safer by taking that risk now. You know, and it seems like a risk, but buying a bunch of NVIDIA stock right now is way riskier than buying a rental property, you know?
I agree. Well, that is
such good wisdom.
a mountain of wisdom, and
Mhm.
but also put in a simple, authentic form. So, you know, we appreciate you, obviously, the work we've done together, the friendship we've done together, the kidney donation brainstorming we've done together, which I can say I've only done that with 1 out of 1,000 clients, and that'd be you. And you know, and we're
Yeah.
just so happy to see you continuing to spend time with the kids and take the
Now the
adventures and do the
grandkids.
hobbies and the grandkids now.
Exciting.
And
Yeah.
and we appreciate, and you even have done the generosity of referrals for us. So, you know, we appreciate you, Tom. Thank you so much for coming on and inspiring us and so many others, and taking those leaps of faith when it could have been easier to stay stagnant. That is something that we definitely want to inspire in our children.
Testimony of
for
faith,
sure.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, I want to get down to Northeast Florida and get a kookaburra coffee with you sometime soon, Jim.
We'd
So
love to have
Love
it.
that.
Let's make it happen sooner than later.
That's right.
yeah, if I can catch you in town.
Thanks, Tom.
Right, exactly.
All right.
Great having you.
Thanks, guys.